Senator Marco Rubio, United States Senator from the great state of Florida, joins us now. Someone I like very much. Well, like is easy, but respect and admire very much, too. Good morning, Senator Rubio.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. I want to talk about your comments on the student loan proposals yesterday. But first, Bergdahl, I saw you on TV the other night. Very thoughtful, sober comments you made. Can you bring us up to date on your thinking on this as the situation's unfolded some?
Well, I think there are three avenues of inquiry here with regard to what happened with Bergdahl. I mean, the first that's been talked about repeatedly is just the fact that the president refused to notify even Democrats in Congress, but apparently notified at least 60 to 90 members of his own administration with regards to this. So there's a legality question associated with all of this. That is a topic of inquiry. But I think the most pressing items for me are, number one, the fact that 5 very dangerous individuals, perhaps the 5 most dangerous individuals being held in Guantanamo, are now in Qatar and eventually will be back in the battlefield against the United States at a time when the Taliban is growing increasingly dangerous, as you've seen over the last 72 hours with multiple attacks against both Pakistani forces and now the reports this morning that 5 members of the U.S. Armed Forces have been killed in an attack in Afghanistan. And the second is the precedent that it sets. It is now clear to our enemies all over the world that if you can get your hands on an American serviceman or woman, there's that great value in being able to change them for a hostage or, for a prisoner or for anyone else that you would want to get back. So both of these things have made the world a more dangerous place for Americans and have run counter to the national security interests of the United States.
Yeah, interesting, the two major points you make, which is if I were teaching my old course in morality, ethics, and foreign policy, I would make the same too. Both of them leave Bergdahl, kind of his worthiness out of the picture. That's a separate question, isn't it, to be determined later by proper inquiry.
That's right. And having an American serviceman back with his family and his country, irrespective of what he may or may not have done during the service of our country, is not something that anyone is upset about. We're glad that he's back. What we're upset about is the process that was followed to do it. If I were president, I would have done anything to get him back, but except anything that endangered other servicemen or women on an ongoing basis or ran counter to our national security interests. And in this case, this trade did both of those things, unfortunately.
Does it strike you, Senator Rubio, and this is what unnerves me as things develop, that sometimes I think the president just doesn't think about Americans' policy in the way that most of us do, that there's a difference of priorities, there's a difference of orientation toward the United States. Is there something to that?
There is, but even deeper than it to me, this is all about politics. I think this is perhaps the first president we've had in modern history where all foreign policy is about domestic politics. If you look at the week that preceded this action, first he goes on Memorial Day to Afghanistan to visit with the troops, which of course is not something we're going to criticize. That's a very valid thing for him to do. Then he comes back and gives a speech at West Point where he declares the war in Afghanistan over. I don't think the Taliban got that memo. And then caps off the week with this exchange, which I believe the White House thought would be met with euphoria. He would be congratulated for having pulled this off. What a great move. That's what he anticipated the response would be. I don't think they anticipated the controversy that would swirl around it. So in my mind, this was done as part of a narrative and an arc that he was trying to create to recapture domestic political support and momentum at a time when he's been roundly criticized from all corners for his feckless foreign policy.
Yeah, both reads may be true, yours and mine. I quite agree with you about the politics, but the misreading of the American people, the American mood, and it seems to happen often. I just had wondered early on in the administration, I don't ask you to comment on this, on the sensibility of this president. Does he think of the country and the American people the same way that most of us do? I don't know.
Who advises him on this? Most of the people advising him on many of these moves are political hacks. I mean, these are campaign consultants and folks that are more experienced in politics than they are in foreign policy, and you see that reflected time and again in all the moves that he's making.
Right, but even their soundings aren't very good. I mean, in terms of their assessment of the American people. Let's get to the main topic that we asked, that we're so happy to have you on about. Student loan announcement yesterday. President made an announcement to ease the burden on students. What do you think of it? It doesn't sound like a good deal to me. Tell us.
Well, so the concept that we would somehow want to measure the repayment options that people have before them to how much they make is not necessarily a bad one. And in fact, I'm working on a solution to do that in a responsible way. The problem with what the president has done, beyond the fact that it's through executive action, is the forgiveness aspects of it. You know, after 20 years, 10 years of you're in the public sector, 20 years of not, the whole loan is forgiven. And in my mind, it creates the potential for more of this to occur in the future. I mean, one of the fundamental problems that we have in America today is we have a mid-20th century higher education system, which is a cartel that protects itself against innovation and competition, and it is it's awarding a lot of degrees that don't lead to jobs, and it's charging a lot of money for it. The evidence is quite clear that the more money we've made available, whether it's through loans or grants, there's no incentive for these universities and colleges to, if I'm going to give you $4,000 a semester, what's the incentive to lower my price to $3,500 a semester? Right. The incentive is to take up all $4,000. And then a lot of it is people getting degrees that don't lead to jobs. And again, the liberal arts departments go nuts when you talk about the fact that an arts history major is going to struggle to find a lot of work given the new economy. So I would hope that we would take a more comprehensive view of all the issues involving higher education in the 21st century, including the need to create a system where a 41-year-old head of household who has lost his job or her job and still has to raise a family and work full time is able to go back to school and acquire skills or reacquire skills that allow them to be employed. And they're not all the left is focusing on is pouring more money into an existing, outdated status quo, but they have no ideas whatsoever about moving us into the 21st century in terms of higher education.
Yeah, no, exactly right. A lot of these themes that you just touched on, you did in more depth. It was the Miami-Dade speech, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and
I just honestly, there was a time in the 50s and 60s and 70s even where higher education was an important option available to many people. In the 21st century, higher education is a necessity for all people. But my point is, it doesn't always have to be a 4-year, 6-year college degree.
Right.
There are multiple different ways to acquire advanced education, and you're going to need it in the 21st century. But we have a one-size-fits-all system more interested in protecting their status quo than they are in allowing innovation to enter that space, and accreditation is a big part of that. There's a lot of other issues that are tie into this, but part of it is the financial aid structure that basically protects this existing higher education cartel.
Yeah, we're talking to Senator Marco Rubio. Yeah, these massive open online courses, the MOOCs, are potentially very interesting in this regard as well. And as you talk about the 2-year colleges, community college system, I noticed the other day something like 23% of new employees at Google do not have college degrees. Google, they're not dumb over there. They don't seem to attach the value to the college degree simply that a lot of other people do. They're looking for something else.
The goal is learning, not to acquire a piece of paper that says you learn. The goal is to learn, and people learn today in the 21st century through multiple ways: life experience, work experience, internships. You can establish proficiency through testing, online courses, community colleges. Being able to package the learning you've acquired and certify it in an accredited way is our challenge. And if you have served 2 tours of duty in the Middle East in the military, should we really make you pay a lot of money to sit through a course on Middle Eastern affairs? I mean, you've lived it. I think you maybe could teach the course. I'm not sure you should be required to take it. That's just one small-scale example of the kinds of outdated thinking that are pervasive in our higher education system.
Now, the announcement the President made yesterday, bottom line is it's hard to believe that it isn't going to cost the taxpayers. If you're deferring payment, lowering monthly payments, somebody's got to pay the check. Is it going to be the rest of us?
Sure. So, look, making payments sensitive to your income makes sense in the sense that it's better than default, because then you're on the hook for 100% of it. The forgiveness part is what gets very difficult. If you allow someone to not pay very much on the loans forever, and then at some point just forgive the whole thing, then that whole bill is going to fall on the taxpayer. But I am working on, in fact, I'll have an op-ed in the next couple of days, and I'll share it with you ahead of time with some of the details of it. I'm working on what I hope will be a bipartisan measure that does create a income-sensitive repayment structure, but doesn't come with the potential cost on taxpayers that this does. In fact, has the potential to save us money because it will avoid defaults.
What about this distinction, as the president loves, between the private sector and the public sector? I think it's a disparagement of the private sector. But, it's easier on you if you take a job in the public sector as if that is a preferred sphere.
Yeah, I think what it argues is that somehow it's more noble. And certainly public service is a valid profession. You've done it. I've done it. Serving your country in government is a valid way to serve our country. But so, too, is creating jobs in the private sector.
Yeah.
Someone who's out there now who's decided to risk everything they own to start a new business because they believe so much in their idea and as a result end up employing hundreds of people over the next few years has done a great service to themselves, but has also done a great service to the people that work for them and ultimately to the country. You look at what American innovation has done as far as expanding America's influence in the world. The fact that we're the most innovative country in all of human history has been a big part of the American century, and that's a great service to our country as well. So just because you might get paid more in the private sector doesn't make it less noble, and it's certainly less work.
And if you do, you've seen the same charts I have about pay in the private and public sector, and it's gone up in the public and not overall in the private. Well, let me ask you one last question. We got to let you go. Not much time here. You mentioned how many of these decisions made by this president are political. Was this another one yesterday? Elections coming around, so let's go after those millennials. And a lot of the millennials are actually, though they supported President Obama, are quite disappointed in him.
That's right. There's no doubt it is, because today Senator Warren will offer up her bill, which she basically lowers the interest rate on student loans by a minuscule amount in terms of real-life impact in exchange for the Buffett rule, as they call it, which is a massive tax increase. And so it was time to coincide with the announcement of that in the Senate. The message they're trying to send here to 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who can't find a job is, we're here to help, we're going to make your life easier, and what they're hoping is that Republicans will just oppose it and have no alternative. But we do have alternatives. We look forward to talking about those alternatives, and I hope they'll give us a chance to vote on those alternatives. Unfortunately, in the Senate, Harry Reid at these days doesn't really allow a vote on anything.
Thank you very much. So glad you're paying attention to these things, Senator Rubio. We really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.